So I'm going to start a series of videos that's going to walk you through creating a top-down action game using Unity, right? So here I am in the Unity editor. I have a brand new Unity 3D Universal Renderer Pipeline, or URP project that I've just created. And I'm going to show you in this video really how to work with the Unity editor and how to prototype a small room in a level. Okay, so first things first, we see that we have this URP empty template. Welcome to all this stuff. Nice little hint here, click the remove readme assets and it just gets rid of this pane and you're back to just a standard project that has really only the things you want it to. Okay, so there we go. Very quick to run. We see we have in our scene, we have a main camera. That's this guy over here. That's what we see when we run our game. We see through its lens. We see a directional light, which I'll talk about lighting in another video, and a global volume, which is really for effects and things like that. So we don't really actually have any 3D objects, so we're going to add one. So I can either right-click on the hierarchy view, or I can click on Game Object in the menu up top, and I'm going to choose 3D Object. I'm going to give us a plane to represent the ground. Okay, so here we have it flash blue for a second while it was loading its texture. That's fine, and we see it's right here on the ground. Now I can rotate around this in the editor if I have this this move tool. If I hold down the Alt key and I sort of drag my left mouse button, okay, that lets me sort of rotate it around. I can use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out based on wherever my mouse is at the time. I can hold down Alt and use right click and hold that to zoom in and out as well. I can release Alt and then just use the middle mouse button and hold that and pan around. So there's a lot of stuff I can do, right? So we really have a lot of control. Another nice little thing is if you find yourself sort of looking nowhere and you really want to focus on the plane, you can select it in the hierarchy view and hit F on your keyboard and it sort of brings it into focus for you. Okay? So very handy stuff there. You play around with this, you'll get used to it. Now, if I want this plane to be a little bit bigger, I can use my scale tool. That's this one right here. I can hit R on my keyboard and that brings me to that. And I can click W or click on this move tool to get back to the standard way. So I'll hit R and choose my scale tool. Notice these little handles around the box are now kind of this blue, red, and green for the various axes that we have. So if I want this to be a little bit wider, I can kind of drag it and move it around. Now note that this is a plane. This is kind of a 2D object. So changing the this this y-axis doesn't really make any difference to me. And if you're ever wondering what axes are which, you can sort of see them located over here, color-coded as well. Now, one bad thing about scaling like this is that by default it doesn't snap. And so now I have the scale of 1.9 and 1.8, and I can click over here in the transform, and I can type in 2 and sort of manually change that around. I'm actually going to take the Y back to 1 because the Y doesn't really do anything, and I don't want to have a number here that's really confusing. Another fun fact here is I can actually hold down the Control key on Windows as I'm clicking and dragging, and now it just really snaps to major increments. Okay, so that's another factor there. Okay, so when we run our game, we should see through the camera's lens, we see our little plane. It doesn't really do anything, but we see that we have our plane in the game world. Now, let's go in and add a few cubes to represent walls. So I'm going to right click here. I'm going to create a 3D object. I'm going to create a cube. I could also use the game object menu. I tend to more often click on the hierarchy to add them. And it's telling me the name of this thing is a cube. I'm going to call it a wall instead. If I wanted to rename my plane to ground, I can right click on that and click rename and type in ground. You can also just double click it and that works too. All right, so here I've got a wall and it's in the center here and it appears to be maybe below my plane. Yeah, it is below the plane, which is why we don't actually see it. So if I go back to my move tool and I move it up, I see it's now above the plane. Okay, and that actually changed its position. So I'm going to round these values out, call that -1, I'll call this 0.5, and I'll call this 2, just to keep things nice and round and even. Okay. Now, this isn't quite the size I want it to be, and it's not quite in the position I want it to be. So I'm going to make this wall over here first. We're going to kind of make a nice little square arena. And again, I'll round these values out to 10 and to 0. And now I can type in whatever scale I think I want. So I'm going to give myself a scale of x of, well, I think actually I want to do my scale of z of 10. Okay, well, and that's halfway to where I want to be. So I'll go 20. Okay, now I can see I've got a little wall. Very good. Now this wall might be a little thick, it might be a little short. So I might choose to scale this thing up to maybe have a height of 4, and then I might choose to hold control and sort of snap it up to be at the base level here. And I think that's nice. So I like this wall. I think this is a very good wall for that direction. I want to have 4 of these things. So next thing I want to do is I'm going to want to make this wall over here, this kind of south wall as I'm looking at the screen. So I'm going to hit Control C and then Control V to copy it. Now I copied and pasted it directly onto the space it was already on. So now I can actually drag it, and I'm using Control here to help me drag efficiently. And now I've got 2 walls that are effectively the same, but they're now at different locations in the world. Okay. Now, if I want to have another pair of walls for the east and west, or whatever these 2 directions are that we will call, one of the things we can do is we can actually go in and we can select both of these walls. So hitting Control and then clicking, so they're both selected, and I can copy and I can paste. And well, now I've got 2 more walls, but they're not where I want them to be. Well, thankfully there's a rotate tool. I can click on the rotate tool over here, or hit E on my keyboard, and now I can actually click and control click on this little green thing, and I can start to rotate it. And I'm actually rotating it around that central axis there. And doing that, I actually have a very nice little box. It looks like something you might roll some dice in a role-playing game. But that's very good. So this, we got some corners here that don't quite line up. I could tweak the scaling a little bit more on the walls, but the player is likely not going to see these intersections. Okay, so if we go into the game, so if I run this, we'll see kind of how this looks like if we were to run the game, and we see, wow, this actually looks pretty good. It looks like I'm inside the box. Now, I wanted kind of a first-person view, a third-person view, like a top-down view. So right now our camera is right here inside the game world, which is fine, but it's not what we want for the type of game that I'm going to be creating in the series of videos. I want something that's more top-down. So I'm going to hit W or go to the Move tool, and then I'm going to actually take this camera up, and you see that the main camera preview down here is actually changing as I move the camera around. And so I can go in here and I can actually rotate it down, and I can kind of find the view that I like. Now, that works okay, but sometimes I find it's easier for me to actually, use these tools here to rearrange my editor view to be the view that I like. And so if I find that I like that, I've got a view I really like here, well, I can actually go into select main camera, and then I believe it is component. I always lose track of where it is. Okay, so it's game object, and it's going to be align with view. It's actually going to move my camera to align with my editor camera. So now my game camera is seeing exactly what I'm seeing in my editor. Now, if I wanted to do the opposite, if I'm like, oh, I'm over here, I want to see the game in my editor the way that the camera does, I can say game object align view to selected, and that actually does that right there. Okay. But you have to have the main camera selected in your sample scene there. So this has been really some basic tips around Unity and prototyping a small room. We're going to follow this on by adding in a player object and showing how we can use Unity's new input system to control that player. So stay tuned for future content and let me know what's interesting to you and what questions about Unity you have. But happy coding.